Record to. Okay, here we are. Welcome, and thank you all for joining us today for our Grant Writing University with our special guests and friends from Choice Words Ithaca. We have our experts. They are our experts, Amanda Heidel and also Brianna Maloney is with us. And did I say that correctly? Maloney, right? Brianna? Okay, because I'm terrible with names, and I don't have a really easy name either, my last name, so I should totally know better. So my name is Gloria Kwaku, and you all know me as the Grant Lady. But trust me, I do a lot more than just grants. I serve as the Chief Equity Engagement and Grants Officer here at the Community Foundation, and that's just a really fancy way to say that I get to work with wonderful organizations like yours to help you fulfill your mission. I do want to start by acknowledging the vital role, the very, very important role, the critical role that you all as community organizations play in strengthening our community. I always tell you your work is important, and we're here to support you in accessing the funding that you need. And here at the Community Foundation, we believe that strong organizations build what? They build strong communities. We are committed to you all, to the organizations that make up our community, that serve our community. Um, I understand, especially me, I understand that navigating this world of grant making is not easy, and that's why we try to give you all the support and all the resources and all the different ways that we can try to make this an easier lift for you. We do this workshop every year, and thankfully, Amanda says yes every year. So again, Amanda and Brianna, I want to thank you for being here today. We're so super thrilled and excited to bring you this resource to explore different skills, tools, and strategies needed to successfully secure grant funding. Grant writing is a learning process, and I do say this all the time. Even the most experienced grant writers make mistakes. Um, but knowing what funders are looking for can really help you avoid those common pitfalls. This workshop is designed to provide hands-on learning, practical insights, and actionable strategies to enhance your grant writing success. So before I actually get started, if you could just, I'm going to pick on two different people. Just share your name and your organization, and one thing you hope to gain from today's session. So I am going to pick on Laura.
I knew I was running into that one when I turned on my camera. Hi everyone. My name is Laura Anglada and I work for Go Ithaca. And I'm happy to be here. Excited to learn about some grant writing.
Perfect. All right. And then the next person, thank you so much for that, Laura. And then the next person I'm going to pick on is Donna.
I'm Donna Ramos. I'm happy to be here today. I'm fairly new in my role as Executive Director of Tompkins Learning Partners in Ithaca, and I hope to be able to hone in on what parts of our story to tell and how to best do that to convey what we're excited about our organization and the impact it has in the word limits that we always face.
Yes, word limits. Those freaking word limits. Well, in our case, character limits. All right. Thank you so much, Donna, for sharing. So before we start our session, I wanted to just make a couple announcements before I hand this over to Choice Words. Um, our 2025 grant cycle opens up next week, Wednesday, April 9th, and it closes on May 14th. Just like we do every single year, we will do an information session that is scheduled for next week, Wednesday at this time at 12 p.m. I'll go over eligibility, the grant process, the review process, what to expect, tips on what our review team members look for. I'll also do a walkthrough on the application questions. So we will experience the platform together. I am actually going to post a registration link in the chat if it will allow me to. Let's see if I can do this with my 5 million windows open. Okay, let me see if you got that. Did everyone get that? Okay, so that's the registration for our Q&A session. And then during the grant cycle, you know that we always host our weekly office hours at Duncan. It's not a requirement. You can just stop through if you have any questions about your answers. You want to know how to tell this story over another story. If you want critique over your answers, if you just want me to go through it, whatever it is that you need, I'll be there for an hour every single Tuesday, 12:30 to 1:30 during the grant cycle. And then the last thing I want to mention is that we are looking for grant reviewers. That application is now open as well, and I will also put that link in the chat. So I will not take up any more time. Let me post this in the chat. Okay. All right, so now I am going to stop share. Let's see. And then I also wanted to mention that because this is a smaller group, this is great because it will be more of a personalized experience for you. So start thinking about those questions that you have. It's really hard to do that, on a larger scale with more people. So please keep that in mind. And Amanda, it is all yours.
Thank you. Before we start, we're just curious, has anyone ever been to a presentation with us before? Or is this your first time with the Choice Words presentation?
First time for me.
Okay, great.
First time.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you are all in for a treat.
All right. So I'm at the end of the presentation, so I'm going to go all the way back. A little sneak peek here. Okay, so I'm Amanda. I'm the grants manager at Choice Words Ithaca. I'm also here with Brianna Maloney, who is the vice president of Choice Words. And today we're hoping to just kind of give you an insight into grant writing, but also if you have any questions, because like as Lori was saying, we are a small group, feel free to just interrupt and, bring any questions you have, that's relevant to a slide, and we can kind of just like workshop things on the fly. Also, we have our tips and tricks in red throughout the presentation. So you can note those, and there'll also be a slide at the end with all of the tips and tricks at the end in case you missed any. So a little bit about who we are. So we're a grant writing and fundraising firm that helps nonprofits, municipalities, educational institutions, and businesses identify and acquire grant funding. And so our Ithaca office is fairly new. It's about 2.5 years old, but our main office is in the Hudson Valley. And so that opened about 14 or maybe even 15 years ago. Brianna and our president of the company, Steve Densmore, started that. So we work with organizations across New York State. And I think at this point we're we've won like almost 190 million for organizations within New York State. So we feel really proud of that, that what we've been able to accomplish to help New York State specifically.
I think Laura has a question.
Yeah, Laura.
Thank you so much, Brianna. Yeah, I was just wondering if this is going to be recorded, and if so, can I receive a the video, like after it's done?
Yes,
Okay, awesome.
absolutely. It is being recorded. Right now, you should have got a prompt that said it's being
Yeah,
recorded.
I did. I actually just saw it, but I just wanted to know if I could get a version of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I can
All right.
send it to everyone who has joined, and it'll also be posted on our website.
Okay, thank you so
Yes,
much.
of course.
Sorry for interrupting.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks, Laura.
Not at all.
never sorry. Feel free to interrupt whenever. So we wanted to start with what is a grant because some people, might be coming to this completely fresh. So it's a general term for funds that organizations receive and is not expected to be repaid. And to receive a grant, organizations must compete for funds by submitting an application, and you basically, in any form, are going to go undergo an evaluation process. So this could look different from a family foundation to a larger federal grant. So those are different processes. Some people have different like boards who are reviewing applications and things like that. So grants may be awarded by state or local agencies, private foundations, or corporations. Um, so since they're not paid back, this is like a common misconception that they're free money, but they're not. So they should also be spent responsibly and according to what was described in the approved application. Um, Not all the time, but some funders require some kind of reporting showing how the funds were spent. Even small grants can ask for some kind of report at the end. So it is important to just make sure that you're aware of those requirements. So every application is different and asks varied questions, and many ask for specific things. So, and we'll get into some of those specific things in the next slide, but some of them can ask for letters of support. So you probably want to create some sort of document or a standard letter where, you can give that to people locally to vouch for what you're doing in the community. Most are going to ask for some kind of financial document, and all types of other things, budgets, mission statements, things like that. And then having funding and eligibility requirements, all of them are going to have something. Some of them will say you need to be, the only way you can apply is if your operating budget is $750,000 or more. Some say, we only fund $5,000 per application. So there's very specific nuances that you want to always look into within each application. Most of them are going to require a project to align with a specific mission or a goal. And this can look different from every sort of organization across the board. There may be an application form, an online portal, an LOI, which is a letter of intent. So that's, a shorter sort of letter that you would send. A lot of family foundations ask for that, or some not super common, but still ask some of them for snail mail. So so everyone is going to ask for it to be submitted in a different way. Like we said before, some of them require reports and some of them have different timelines. So you just want to kind of create calendar alerts to know when a grant is going to, a deadline is going to approach. Some have, yearly annual deadlines. Some are more, like for family foundations, I know that they'll have whenever the board meets, they want something to be received within 2 weeks of that date. So there's very specific timelines for each. So these are common questions in documents. I think it's helpful to sort of, as you're getting into grant writing, to be able to have all of these, at the ready so that you can kind of just pull from things. You can create a central repository, maybe digitally, like on Google Drive or something, so that you have all of this stuff ready so that when you are applying for grants, you can kind of just like easily copy and paste certain things, edit and tailor towards each grant. So these are specific, your mission statement, your project and program summaries, detailed descriptions of projects. So something that is short and sweet and to the point, and then also something more detailed. The history of your organization, your impact and outcomes, always all of your budgets, so your annual budget, and then all of your project budgets. the target audience and demographics and any sort of like data that you have around those topics, and then a timeline of your project. Again, letters of support and the 990s or audited financials and your 501(c)(3) status letter, or if you're a fiscally sponsored project, you want to have your fiscal sponsor's 501(c)(3) letter and any sort of like agreement letter that you have with that organization and a board list. And if you're fiscally sponsored, it would be the fiscal sponsored's board list. Okay, so how or why might you use a grant to fund your proposed project? So you would start with what are your needs? So what do you actually need funding for? A lot of times we meet with organizations and it's like a very long list of needs, which it makes a lot of sense because there are so many things that you would need funding for to kind of everyone's working on a shoestring budget. You know, it's can be hard to kind of manage everything, and there are a lot of needs. But we find asking for like the top three needs, like what do you really need, versus a lot the long list of things that are your wants is really key because you could focus on those three things and then move on to the next three things and chip away at things slowly. So, are you needing a program, like support for your program, which is like ongoing support for something that you do, a project, like a one-time need, general operating support, which is not always common, but became more common during COVID and something that is really special about the Community Foundation that they provide to the community. Capacity building, some kind of professional development for your organization, capital support, maybe building needs or things like that, or event support. So really narrowing down what your needs are is pretty key. And then research. So once you identify what those needs are, you can jump into researching to identify what those opportunities are to help you create a grants calendar. So these are just some sort of tips for you to, get started. You can go to grants.gov, statewide financial systems, SFS, that is the former Grants Gateway, and then other relevant agency websites. You can look at your county, city, agencies with similar goals, corporate websites, grant search engines, and services such as Foundation Directory. Instrumental is one that we use, Grant Watch, and others. You can sign up for things like Candid to send you ongoing things, opportunities that might be relevant to you. And this is a big one, looking at similar organizations and who is funding them. And that's not to compete with organizations within your area, but more to just like understand how people receive funding. And it's not even necessarily where you don't have to look within organizations locally. You can look outside of your local ecosystem towards maybe even organizations in New York City, organizations in the Hudson Valley, all across New York State to just see who's funding them, to get curious. It could really lead to just like a broader understanding of how people get funding.
Amanda, I just had a thought too, that I was going to add that now is totally slipping my mind now that I said that. Another way to find it. Oh my gosh. I was just thinking of then I looked at Gloria's thing. All right, I will get back to you.
Well, I mean, do you have anything you want to add here,
I'm
Brianna?
sorry, Brianna, I messed you up. I was trying to put the links for the for
Well, I was just thinking of another place that they could look for opportunities, but now, um, yeah, I can't remember what I was going to say. Wow. Okay, I'll get back to you.
That's okay. And some of these are, pay to play like Foundation Directory or Instrumental, but you might be able to find places that have access to them and see if you can, piggyback on those.
All right, I thought of it.
Okay, good.
Board members. We always forget your board. A lot of board members have corporate relationships or just even relationships with other foundations. And a lot of, especially corporations, they might not necessarily have an open grants program. But if there's someone on the board who can talk about your organization and provide some information, sometimes that's a step in the doorway, especially with banks, although a lot of the banks do have open applications. Most banks will give, let's say, like anywhere from 5,000 to maybe 25, 50 at the most. But then if you have a relationship, I have an organization that managed to get a $200,000 grant from Key Bank because they had someone on their board. So it's worth it just to go to your board and ask everyone, maybe explain the process and see if anyone has any connections.
Those are really good points. And also in your community, asking around to other people who are looking for funding or receiving funding to ask them, advice. Okay, and these are some search tips. So, as you're searching, you really want to dig into the eligibility because it can be pretty specific. So sometimes it looks like this like really sparkly, like amazing grant that like really fits your needs. And then you get into the eligibility and you realize there's like geographic restrictions in red there, one of our tips and tricks. So you want to really make sure that you are checking that. Also, if they accept unsolicited proposals, I think that some people might feel like, oh, well, I'm just going to send one anyway because I feel like they'll see what my mission is and they'll want to support it. It's in alignment, but it is important to, try to like connect with someone who works there or is like on the board there, or have one of your board members do that work with you to sort of like get a connection and then send something. We feel like that would be, helpful in trying to instead of just sending it out cold. Okay, so then also you can check 990s. This is so helpful. Brianna taught me this when I first started, and I think it's like such a helpful tool. So when you look at the 990s, you can actually see oh, sorry about that. Their actual giving patterns of what they're giving, where they're giving, who they're giving to, and it's just super helpful in crafting your application and also just like managing your own expectations. Um, Another thing in red is don't chase money. So like if you don't really have a program or need that matches what they are doing, but you really want to apply, but in order to apply, you're going to have to like make up this whole other program. Just don't do that. We feel like we've seen it over and over again that it just doesn't really work very well for organizations because then you're kind of like running this program that you didn't really want to be running in the first place or like wasn't really an actual need and you're actually trying to tailor it to this to their eligibility requirements and they also can see that. So just not chasing money is our biggest tip. And then checking due dates against your funding needs timeline. So if you have a program that you're trying to fund that's like, in the summer and you're looking for funding a month before, that's going to be really hard to get that funding. So you want to do things somewhat in advance. Okay, so alignment with guidelines is critical. And so we went over some of this already. So this is just another little bulleted list of elements of a strong proposal. So things that you just want to make sure that you have in your back pocket to sort of have ready for an answer to some of these grant application questions. So now jumping into proposal writing tips. So again, you want to read the guidelines really carefully and follow directions and submit in advance. Always submit in advance, even and follow the directions, even if they seem like really nuanced and like, okay, put this before this, make sure you do it this way. Just follow the directions because um, they might even reject your application because you didn't follow the simple direction.
I want to give a really scary example because
Do it,
examples
do it.
are fun. We had a state grant and they asked for the number of something and we gave the percentage. And this was just one question. And we got kicked out of the entire process because we put it in percentage form instead of number form. We ran it up the flagpole. We spoke to everyone at the state. They would not reevaluate it. Luckily, there was another round. We put it in, we changed it, and we did win. But, the organization was understandably very frustrated. So it's crazy, but it does go down to those little things sometimes.
Thank you for sharing that because that, it really it does matter following those directions. And another thing is to submit in advance. There has been horror stories of like the portal collapsing and like you can't submit in time and they don't accept it. They're like you should have submitted in advance. And so there has been, and sometimes even with online portals, you can run into a technical issue. Um, and so it might take some time to figure that technical issue out. And so if you're doing something at the very last minute, there's no extra time to figure those things out. So we always strive to set internal deadlines, like 2 days in advance even with a client so that we all know that we're going to submit in advance and no changes after that unless sometimes things happen, but making sure to get everything in as soon as possible ahead of the deadline. This is a big one that I think sometimes gets missed is writing your budget before you write your narrative because your narrative and your budget should match. And so when someone's on a panel is looking at your application and they're looking at your budget, you could even have something really small in the budget that was never spoken about in the narrative, and they could be like, "Huh, that's why wasn't that, addressed?" And so I think just making sure that you're clear about what you're looking for funding for specifically. And so mirroring the budget to the narrative helps. And we find a lot of times that writing the budget before writing the narrative can really help because sometimes you're writing, and I've seen this happen before writing for an organization. We write the whole narrative and then they send the budget, and then the budget doesn't fully match the narrative, so we have to go back and rewrite the narrative. So it is helpful to write that before. Um, and as you're writing, just making sure you understand the funder's mission and priorities, and it's helpful to use real life examples. So concrete stories to illustrate your impact that you're having in your community or wherever you are serving. Focus on people or, also if you're working with animals, not just people. So here we go, showcasing those individuals who will benefit from your project and highlight their stories. And including testimonials is great. So trying to, even if you don't have any testimonials right now, as you're working with groups, just making sure you can somehow figure out a system to get people to give you some testimonials for your work. Crafting a narrative storytelling. So these are just some bullet points, but we do want to ask people if you want to unmute or write in the chat. And you could just start thinking about it right now as we go through this. Um, uh, Crafting your narrative, like and storytelling. Or Brandon, this is the one that you wanted to actually talk about, right?
Well, I was just going to say, I recently had the experience. I don't know if anyone else has written a grant through Lever for Change. Every year they've been doing really large grants through various donors. They all seem to be the divorcees of like tech bros, for lack of a better term. But they have these really big awards, and the interesting thing is, after you apply through the first level, then they ask you to review 4 of the grants or sometimes more. So I hadn't reviewed grants in a while, and I got to read some from like Oklahoma, New Mexico. There was one from Jordan, and there were some really interesting things that I hadn't thought of. And one of the things that one of the applicants had done is when they were talking about their organization with this very limited word count, they, instead of giving a whole story or a testimonial, they would say something like, our programs save lives. Consider this. When Gloria came to us, she was suffering from this, this, and this. after our programs, she is now doing this, this, and this. And it was that short. It was like 2 lines. But every time there was a different question and they talked about themselves, they had this cute little like, consider this, and then told this very little brief story. And I thought that was an amazing way of getting that in there in a short amount of character count and getting the chance to showcase different people who had benefited from their programs. And I thought that was a really neat way to do it. The other thing that I noticed, and it depends, of course, who you're asking money from, is they really did a good job about talking about what was going on in their area and with their population. A lot of these organizations were dealing with indigenous people. And in the Hudson Valley, we really don't have a lot of that. So it was new to me. And just learning about their particular struggles, particularly in that area, was very interesting. I write a lot for Westchester County, and there's such a view of Westchester County as this really wealthy area. So we have to be really careful about telling our story because there is a lot of poverty in Westchester too, and it gets overlooked because there is wealth also. So it's just kind of a reminder that I had in this experience that you have to really act like you're talking to someone who knows nothing about, Ithaca, upstate New York. I'm sure upstate New York is a very misunderstood place because people hear New York and they think of New York City. So that's something just to be careful and to think about.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Rihanna.
Sure.
So these are just some sort of, points for, as you're starting to craft your narrative and doing some storytelling. And really the biggest thing is to highlight the why. Like, why is it important and what impact will it have? And like what Brianna's saying is to keep it short. I think sometimes we think of storytelling as this like long, sort of like winded thing, but it can actually have a lot of impact to just keep it short and sweet. And another big thing is to be clear and write as if no one knows what you're talking about. I think that sometimes there could be like jargon or even if you're writing, this is another thing that I notice a lot. Like if you're writing an application for a funder that is outside of your area, like not doesn't live in Ithaca, doesn't really know anything about it, don't assume that they know anything about Ithaca. So you can, describe what Ithaca's like, or you can put some like descriptive wording so that they have a better understanding of the landscape of Ithaca. So this was the one we wanted to ask your input on. So measurable impact. How do you do it? So these are just a few bullets to be reasonable and thoughtful. I hope, side note, there's some people talking in the hallway here. I'm at the office. I hope it's not distracting and people can't hear it. So identifying metrics to track. So ambitious but attainable. Creative is a big one. And so short term versus long term. What is the impact on your community, region, state, or country? And then documenting demographics shows us an understanding of the community that you served and is often required. So here we actually wanted to ask you if anybody wants to unmute or put in the chat a project that you're working on that you're trying to understand how to measure impact on, that we can help you learn a creative solution to move that forward. And you don't have to have it like fully thought out yet. It can actually just be hypothetical if you need it to be.
I'm trying to think of some examples.
Yeah, or even like questions around measuring impact. You could also ask any of those questions here. The one that I think about a lot is we worked with this farm, Poughkeepsie Farm Project, and they did this whole farm to school program. And one of the things that they did was they like surveyed and figured like they supplied all of this programming and actual food to a school in Poughkeepsie. It was like an elementary and middle school. And they figured out how they had all this data around how kids were actually liking kale. And since they were doing their work together. And so they had, X amount of kids like were opting for the kale over X, this other sort of food item. And I thought that was a really great way to sort of like it was kind of a fun way to bring that kind of data in of how what their impact was really like.
Oh, there is someone in the chat, Amanda. I don't know if you can see this.
I can't see it. Do you want to read it?
Okay. So this isn't a super fully formed question, but when it comes to identifying metrics and impact specifically, do you have any thoughts or recommendations about how to highlight these areas given threats and cuts to DEI, thinking larger state and or federal or even conservative funders? Well, so one thing I've been doing, we just put in all these requests to Gillibrand and Schumer, or I'm still putting them in because they're due Friday. Instead of talking about DEI as much, we kind of reframed it as these supports are going to help people be less reliant on government funding and government assistance. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems to be the focus of the administration right now a little bit more. And that came from my clients as well, were willing to frame it in that way so that ultimately, there'll be less of a dependency on the government instead of focusing on just helping vulnerable people because we should, you know? Um, I mean, that's the one thing that I've seen. But also, when we're talking, yeah, I guess you're talking about state or federal. I was going to say, a lot of foundations are still doing the good work. They still care about DEI. So there's still plenty of that out there. Um,
We've also seen that some foundations are actually increasing their giving
yeah,
because of what's going on.
yeah. And the state and federal are usually pretty specific about what outcomes they want to see, too. There's not as much room for creativity usually. So I don't know if that'll necessarily be as much of an issue.
Um,
Um,
oh,
oh,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead, Laura.
No, I was just gonna add real quick, kind of to expand on what you were saying. I think that sometimes, uh, in my opinion, from what I've seen, especially with the state of our current administration, everything that's going on, I think that keeping it somewhat neutral is also a really good way to go about it. Um, not necessarily saying that we shouldn't try to highlight that these funds are going to be utilized for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and things like that, but at least like keeping it as neutral as possible, whilst keeping the general gist of what it is that is being asked for. Um, because a lot of the times, even though the funding, if the funding is, if you are given the funding, you can utilize that for people in that community. It doesn't necessarily have to specifically say, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, for um, some ways that we are measuring impact for Go Ithaca, one thing that we've recently done is we've created a survey. As Amanda had mentioned, surveys are really good for assessing the general need and things like that. And in those surveys, there's a variety of questions that help us kind of see what communities are lacking, what people need the most, what would be a good, like something good to add onto our program and things like that. So just kind of surveys, I think, is a good way to measure the impact.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I also, I do think the being neutral about the uh the sort of language is a good, I mean, it feels frustrating, but like we recently I was working with one of the writers on our team on an NEA grant, National Endowment for the Arts. And so that's basically what we ended up doing was kind of just like changing a lot of the language. It's definitely extra work, but it was changing a lot of the language to just make it more neutral and sort of just like straightforward. And yeah, and I don't know what will come of that, but that is what we did too.
We do have another comment from Dorothy. She said, one of our projects is to seek funding so that we can provide a continuous source of fresh produce for our food pantry programs. We measured impact by analyzing the number of families who chose fresh produce over the year versus not. Is this the most appropriate way to assess impact? I think it's a good way, but I think it also depends on what your results were. If the results were really good, if 80% of families were choosing it, then absolutely. If you found that it wasn't that good, then I would try to find something that gave you more positive results. Or you could say, hey, we found that only 50% were choosing fresh produce. So now we have we created these brochures that talk
Yeah.
about why it's better and show why you chose that metric to choose it. And yeah, there could be other ways you could measure it. That's probably the easiest way. I think the rest are probably too indirect because what would you measure? Like their health? I mean, that's this little hard to track and
Yeah.
not necessarily related. I think that's a smart way.
Thanks.
Sure.
Anybody else? All right. So just a few more slides here. So reporting impact. So these are just some bullets of, how will you collect your data, outcomes, and impact? Who's going to be responsible for this? So this could be like kind of a big job on your team for someone to take this on. So you want to probably have a specific person making sure they're documenting this. I've actually worked with an organization before that they were doing a lot of very specific work in a school, and they never really were tracking anything, and then it was a USDA grant that they had to report on, and it was a mess to try and report that all at the end, and it was kind of just like guessing. Um, so it is important. There was a lot of turnover that year with the organization. So it is important to make sure that you have someone responsible for something like that. Um, Also and looking again at like reporting requirements, because some funding streams might ask you to provide your impact and reports at, more than once a year. So making sure that you're up on top of that and figuring out how you're going to share that information, and also with the funder and the general public, and what will you do if you fall short of the estimated outcomes. So making sure you have a plan for something like that. And so lastly, like, not every organization, even if you're a really successful one, has a grants program. And what we mean by that is like an ongoing system sort of internally of like applying for grants. So having a grants calendar and making sure that you're tracking grants and applying for them ongoing. And what makes it sustainable? So it's not only just grants, and I'll get into that in a minute, but with grants, you definitely want to make sure that you're staying up to date on research because there's always new things coming out. So you want to make sure you have alerts set, or even make a day or an hour a week for yourself where you're setting time to just do that research to stay up to date. You always, to make this thing sustainable, you're continuously raising money, so you aren't always reinventing the wheel. So you're not just like, oh, I think we need money for this. Let me just kind of now jump on that. So it's more, part of the culture of your organization. We do think a multifaceted approach is really helpful. So having not just grants to hold up your organization, but also like some sort of gala that you hold or another sort of like fundraising event is also really helpful. And building a grants culture or organization-wide buy-in. So we've seen some boards not be super into grant writing or not think it's necessary to have like a designated grant program within your organization. So it's trying to teach people that it is important. And being prepared to submit a strong application. As we mentioned in some of this, in some of the presentation, like there are certain things that they're going to ask that you're going to be asked in the application. So just having a repository of all of those questions and documents and making sure you have folders of past applications so that you can pull information. You're not always kind of just like making things up as you're going. And so I don't know if you were paying attention to the whole thing, but these are our tips and tricks. So these are what we had in red uh, throughout the presentation. And these are some training and resources. So you can go to the Grantsmanship Center. A few of us on the team at ChoiceWords have done some of their what are they called? Training programs, and they were really great. Grantstation.com, the Foundation Center New York, Grant Professionals Association, also community colleges, and Nikon is great as well. And now we're going to open it up for some Q&A, and our emails are down here. So I'm Amanda. This is Brianna is my coworker. And so you can email us at any time. If you have any questions or you just want to follow up about anything, you can feel free to reach out to us. But if anybody has questions, you can feel free to unmute or put it in the chat.
So here is our unique opportunity to pick the brains of our experts here. So we have another few minutes to share. I mean, don't be there. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Just whatever questions that you might have, this is your opportunity to just ask.
How much data or statistics should you include in a grant? I mean, how much is too much? Like 2 to 3 years to show a trend or more, or is it just something that grant reviewers do not want to see?
I mean, I used to be a research librarian, so
Yeah.
I might be skewed, but I think as much as possible.
Okay.
The first thing I notice when I'm reading someone's grant is when they just say, research points to this, or we know this. And it's like, no, I want to know exactly what you mean, especially now that some people are using AI to write grants. To me, if you don't have your own personalized data, then it almost looks AI-ish sometimes. So
Sure.
I don't think you have to go crazy with the years, but as long as you can really specifically talk about not even necessarily your organization, but the problem in your area. Like I use the Census Bureau all the time or the New York State report cards just to give you can't just say, oh, all the kids out here are poor. You want to say 86% of them are economically disadvantaged according to the New York State Department of Ed. That looks much stronger.
And are you backing up those statements with, say, journal citations?
It depends on the funder. A lot of the time you're not going to have room for that anymore. I think as long as you make it clear that it's real, it might be even Forbes or Men's Health, depending on what it is, as long as it's not, some random blog or something. I
Sure.
think to show that you did some actual research. I don't think you need to go into like peer-reviewed journals.
And I can answer from the community foundation standpoint, any type of um, data, qualitative, quantitative metrics that you can add, do it. Our review team members love to see that information because that really shows that you're measuring impact.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a really good question.
Are there any other questions? No burning questions. So everybody's going to have a perfect grant that comes into the Community Foundation on May 14th. Is that right? Right? Is that right?
Maybe not perfect, but we're going to give it our best shot. How about that?
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank Amanda and Brianna for spending their time with us this afternoon and giving us all of this wonderful and great information. And if you didn't notice, this is not just for the Community Foundation grant cycle, but they prepared you for and gave you tips and tricks for, other platforms, for other funders in Tompkins County and government funders and all of that. So hopefully you can use all of that, use the information and use the resources as you see fit. I'm really hoping that this was valuable to you, and it strengthened your grit writing skills and even just a little bit. Also, again, the Community Foundation's info session is going to be held next week, Wednesday. The registration link is in the chat. For those that are watching, you can get to that information if you go to our website at cftompkins.org. You can find all the information there. And I'm just also going to put my email in the chat. So if you do have any additional questions or need anything, you can reach out to me. So that's gquaku@cftompkins.org. And again, maybe Amanda and Brianna, if you can put your emails in the chat as well for anyone that may have some questions. And again, we thank Choice Words for being here. They are not just available to us at the Community Foundation. They are able to support all of you organizations out there. Just reach out to them and see how they can help support you as well. So have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you for spending this time with us and take good care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
everybody.
Bye now. Thank you all so
Bye.
much.